At the top, we got our shot timing profile, same as layup timing profile. This is going to determine how the user's timing affects shots in game. We have a bunch of different ones to choose from. I definitely think this has to do kind of with your skill level. How familiar are you with NBA 2K games? If you're a brand new player, I'm going to personally suggest that normal risk reward, even maybe a low risk reward. But if you've been playing NBA 2K games for quite some time, high risk reward is going to be the best bet. And pretty much just keep it the same with the layup timing. Whatever you do for your shot timing, do the same for the layup. Then we have our free throw timing. For this one, I like to use the user timing instead of the real player percentage. Real player percentage is kind of more RNG. The user timing lets you have more control over it when it comes to free throw shooting. So that way it's based on your skill and not just that RNG percentage of the player. Next we have is shot timing visual cue. I was messing around with this one, and this is another one that I think is definitely kind of personal preference. I was trying release, and I think that release is actually a little bit more difficult. For me, push seemed to be the best. Also, set point isn't too bad. What this setting does is dictate when you're going to release the shot button. So for push, you can see that the user should release the button as the player begins to push the ball forward. So I think this is just visually easier to see for your eyes as opposed to release. Release is kind of like when the ball leaves their fingertips, which is kind of a lot harder to eye up personally. So I think push and even set point are both the best ones. The set point is when your character reaches the top highest part of their jump. We have our shot meter input type. For this one, I have all. So that way I have it for just the shot button and also the pro stick when I'm using that right analog stick. This is, again, kind of personal preference, but I think all is better because it gives you more options. So that way, if you want to use the shoot button or if you want to use the pro stick. We have our pro stick function. I have this set to default. For me, a lot of the times I just end up using the analog stick, the pro stick, for dribble moves, and then I use just the button for the shots. So if you're someone like that, just go with the dribble moves, but just having it default gives you more options. So I think it's always best to just have more options in the long run. For pro stick orientation, we have camera, relative, or absolute. Camera relative is going to be determined based on the angle that the camera is when you're playing the game. So I don't like this. Absolute means it's always going to be the same orientation. It's not going to be based on whatever angle the camera is. So if you have it on camera relative, when you're doing your pro stick moves, it's actually not always going to be the same because your camera angle isn't always going to be the same. So absolute, I think, is the best for that. Same thing with the off-ball offense, absolute as well, because the camera angle is going to constantly change. And you don't want to be trying to figure that out on the fly. Just having it absolute is best. Then we have our double team reaction. For this, I have it set to manual. If it's set to auto, you can kind of get stuck in like a double team animation, whether you want to or not. Having it on manual gives you more control over your play style. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with these controller settings. I'm trying to allow you to take the most control over your characters as opposed to just the default settings. Next, we got our help defense button. I have this set to double team. If you do call for help, it's just going to send an extra player over and it's not going to actually force the double team. So I definitely think you should have this at double team, so that way you just use it when you need a double team. Calling for help isn't really going to help you out that much. Then we have call for picks and roll versus fade. For this, I have it set to manual because I always want to have complete control over this. I don't want to have this on auto when the computer's just randomly doing it when I don't want them to. For player icons, I have this set to on so that you can go ahead and pass more easily to specific players. For skip pass, I have this enabled. So what we do is we go ahead and we hold down the pass button longer. And what this does is it allows us to do a skip pass. This definitely comes in handy instead of having to do like a constant quick pass. Then we have our icon leading pass. This is set to on. Icon passes will lead your receiver if you push the left stick before. So again, we have more control over what we're doing by having this on. Then we have our pro stick pass type. Normal or flashy. Now this one I've been messing around with. I kind of like it at flashy. But again, I feel like this is a little bit personal preference. If you're going to be playing someone as like a point guard constantly, then I think having this at flashy can definitely kind of add a little bit of flavor, make it a little bit more fun. But if you're going to be constantly playing as like big men, centers, power forwards, then you don't really want to worry about having flashy passes. And in case of you accidentally use the pro stick to do a pass, then you would want to have it on normal. So I think this one is going to kind of depend on your position. Point guards, I would kind of suggest flashy. Otherwise, most people I think would just have it at normal. Next one we got is icon passing. If you want to be throwing a lot of like alley-oop lob passes, then just go with pass type control. If you want to have someone who's doing a lot of cuts to the basket and popping to the 3-point line, full receiver control, or you can just leave it on default. Next one we got is the receiver control. For this one I have the receiver will get open. This is another one that I feel is a little bit kind of personal preference. Choose how you want to control the receiver when holding the bounce pass button. And we have a bunch of different options. The full receiver control, again, is the same as the other one. Receiver get open is definitely a little bit easier. The controller is going to automatically try and cut. But if you want to have more control over it, then full receiver control is what I would recommend. Next we have is hold lob pass button. We got skip pass and cut to the basket. At cut to the basket, it's going to go ahead, and when you do a lob pass, it's going to tell the teammate to cut to the basket. Where if we select skip pass, we're just going to skip pass to a player. I like this better because if you do the cut to the basket, someone could be like at the 3-point line, and if you have it set to cut to basket, they're going to literally cut to the basket. Whereas a skip pass will allow you to pass it to somebody who is wide open for like a 3-pointer. So skip pass is good so that you can hit that like perimeter shots. Next one we got is a super duper important one, and that is going to be the passive dribble hand switch. So we have enabled or disabled. Determine whether to allow your passive dribble hand switches when the left stick is released. So if you have this enabled, it means your character passively is going to be switching their dribbling hand. So they might go from their right hand to their left hand, from their left hand to their right hand when you go ahead and you're moving around. Whereas if you have this disabled, they're going to be constantly on that right hand until you do a dribble animation. So until you actually use your stick. Put this to disabled because it gives you more control over how you're going to go ahead and dribble the ball. Next one we got is pro stick defense. We've got camera relative and absolute. This is similar to what I mentioned above earlier with the other setting where it was camera relative and absolute. Camera relative means depending on where we are based on the camera angle, your pro stick defense will change. Or if we have it on absolute, you're always going to have the same input no matter where you are. So I like, again, to have this on absolute. So that way I just know that I can put my pro stick in the same position every time, regardless of the cameras. Then we have who to guard, an in-game indicator telling you who to guard in defensive situations. You can have this on or off. I think this kind of just depends on kind of your skill. It can definitely help in certain situations when you're playing against other people and you kind of lose track of who you should be guarding because there's just, you know, maybe if you're doing like a 5v5 or something and everyone has their customized looks and stuff. But having it off or on, I don't think there's a huge difference. You just get an indicator really. Next we got is box out assistant strength. Determines the effectiveness of the AI box out assistant. This is a weird one because it's going to pretty much auto stick your character to box somebody out, and it's going to be based on whoever is closest to you. So if the box out assistant strength, you have it like maxed out, your character is pretty much just going to constantly box out whoever is closest to them. Whereas if you have this turned completely off, you personally have more control over who you want to go ahead and try and box out. So if you're a guard and you want to just box anybody out, you could turn this all the way up and pretty much the computer is going to auto box somebody out. But if you want to have more control over who you box out, then I would just turn this all the way off, or even just like 25% if you're playing like a big man or someone like that. Scroll down a little bit further. We got 3 different options and you can kind of change these sliders based on personal preference. We have pass target direction, pass target distance, and finally pass target openness. I have mine set all the way to pass target openness because pretty much when I'm passing, I want to focus on whoever is open. I really don't care too much about the direction or the distance. I'm just more focused on whoever is open. I want to make sure that I'm hitting the open man all the time. Stay happy, stay safe. I'll see y'all later. Peace.